Good morning, good afternoon, good day, whatever it might be. My name is Thomas with the Untamed Ambition, and today I wanted to talk to you about a last minute or late in the season food plot tip / technique that may save your season. At the very least, it's going to save your food plots and help you build better food plots going forward. Just try to be more connected with your environment. Try to be more connected with your food. So I'm standing here on a food plot by my house. I refer to it as the honey plot. Throughout this video, I'm sure you're going to hear chickens in the background because I'm basically in my backyard. Got my beehive over there, vegetable garden, not that terribly far away, but this is the area where I raise my chickens, my meat birds in the summertime, and I rotate cover crops through here, and now it's all deer and wildlife, and there's been a ton of deer and turkeys on this food plot. I'm about to employ a technique that I refer to as a fall feed and weed. So you might be familiar with the lawn care technique of weed and feed or feed and weed, whatever they refer to it as, which is basically spreading some sort of synthetic fertilizer that also has some herbicide in it, pre-emergent, that's going to stop germination of certain types of seeds, crabgrass, quackgrass, broadleafs, whatever chemical cocktail they have in there. It's going to suppress weed growth on your lawn while feeding your lawn and boosting it going into the dormant season so you get a better growth next year. Now, I'm not a big lawn care guy. I like my lawn a little bit messy, but the truth of the matter is I hate lawns in general. So I'm not here to give you lawn care advice. I'm here to give you food plot advice, because what I want to see is healthier food plots. And healthy food plots come from healthy soil. And when you have healthy soil and a healthy food plot, that's when you're going to get maximum nutrition into your plants. Nutrition equals attraction, i.e. you're going to pull more deer in, more bucks. You're going to help produce bigger bucks, and you're going to hold your bucks throughout the season, because you have more palatable food, and that's going to equate to more opportunities and more potential success on your end. So let's get into it, right? What is the fall feed and weed concept or technique when it comes to food plotting? Well, it's pretty simple. Cereal rye and an organic manure-based fertilizer applied late in the year. So as you can see, again, I'm standing on my honey plot, the honey plot, and it looks great. At least this half does, because this half is the half that I put some test fertilizer on. The other half looks okay, but it's pretty sparse. It's never been fertilized. It's had chickens on there, so there's some chicken poop. But with the sheer lack of moisture that we've received this year, I mean, we're in serious drought conditions across most of the Midwest. That's been the determining factor. When you have more organic matter in the soil, that's going to hold more moisture. That's going to provide more nutrients. It's also going to hold those nutrients to begin with, and then those plants can uptake those nutrients. Thinking ahead, you know, what can I do this year that's going to give me an advantage for next year? And then you get those cumulative effects with your process where it just gets better and better and better. And that's really the mindset that I think most food plotters need to have. And we need to shift away from this conventional ag mindset, which is, what can I jam into this right now to produce a yield this year without any concern for the soil health or what you're actually doing to that soil long term. So that's why you can see behind me the chemical free sign. This is a completely chemical free food plot. It's never been sprayed. I do lightly work this every year. I'm trying to wean out the weeds. and I'm trying to get it more leveled out. But most of my client situations, we will spray a couple of times and then wean off of the herbicide use once we get the crop growing or rotate our cover crops in and eliminate the native seed bank or any noxious weeds that might be in there. But in this particular setting, I don't ever want to spray it. It's right in my backyard, like I said. Got bees over there, so the last thing I want is bees taking herbicide back into the hive with the honey that my family is going to consume. My kids are out here playing in this from time to time. My dogs come out here, they run around. Obviously they bring that stuff in the house. So I try to do everything I can to eliminate the herbicide or any chemical use on this property if I can at all avoid it. And this is one of those steps in getting you in a routine where you can be chemical free. So how does this feed and weed technique actually work? In the lawn care industry, I believe they refer to us as the weed and feed application. I refer to it as the feed and weed. And the reason for that is, first and foremost, we're trying to feed the existing plants in our food plot. So whether you have a diverse 12 species blend planted in your food plot like this one, this is our fall harvest blend and it's looking great. Or maybe you made the mistake and you planted pure brassicas, which is a major no-no if you do want to improve your soil health. If you don't care about soil health and you're looking to just get good food plots for the next few years, then by all means, I'm not here to interrupt your few years, but you should know that you're not going to be able to do that long term. It's just not a sustainable practice. And I can go into that in more detail in another video, but it doesn't matter what you have planted, assuming that your food plot is relatively established or has already completely failed, you can't screw it up with this situation. So first and foremost, again, we want to feed the existing plants. How are we going to do that? We're going to do that with this custom fertilizer blend. This is a manure-based pelletized fertilizer. It's 100% organic compounds. It's digested dairy manure that has minerals added back into it and additional carbon added back into it. So what that's going to do is it's going to feed not only the growing plants, but the soil biology. That dairy manure is full of active microbes. So as soon as that gets broken down in the soil, which happens relatively quickly, again, being an organic compound or purely organic fertilizer, all it's going to take is some moisture. The pellets are going to swell up and they're going to break down much like worm castings or poop from an earthworm. So that's critical. So we're going to feed that, and this particular blend this late in the year, we're going with a higher nitrogen blend. We want to get more nitrogen into these plants. Think of nitrogen as the protein shake for your plants. If you want to build muscle, you're going to consume protein. You're also going to work out, right? You got to exercise those muscles and then build them back with that protein. Nitrogen is the protein or the building blocks for plant cells. So they need that nitrogen to really grow. So this late in the year, we're going to put a lot of nitrogen in there. But this blend is also very balanced out. So it's not just going to feed them right now, but it's going to feed that soil, and it has that cumulative effect. So it's going to provide nutrients this growing season and give a good jump start going into the next year. And you know, the reality is we're not harvesting a crop. Food plotters have a huge advantage because they're not trying to produce a yield of a specific crop for harvest. So we can get a messy plot and we're not taking it away. You know, the only thing that leaves these plots from a nutrient standpoint is what animals consume and then carry off and poop out in other locations. But at the same time, they're consuming things from other locations and bringing them in. But that's the feed portion of this, okay? The weed portion of this comes from the cereal rye. There's a lot of talk about cereal rye, a lot of hype around it, and I will tell you, hands down, it's pretty much all true. You can't go wrong with cereal rye. Now, it's not super diverse, so your deer aren't going to hit it all the time, and it doesn't stay palatable for too long. As you can see in this food plot around me, there's a lot of rye growing in here. There's also oats and wheat. So it's not all rye, but I just wanted to point that out, that this is not just grass that's growing in. This is stuff we planted. The problem with the rye or the wheat and the oats is once it gets so tall, then it loses palatability to the deer and they're not going to consume it. So we're going to come back in here during our feed and weed process, and we're going to apply more cereal rye, kind of layer it in there so we get varying levels of palatability. But also, and more importantly, is we want to fill in any blank spots. You know, this was originally a broadcast plot, so there's going to be spots that get missed there. If you look up behind me towards the edge of the woods, there's kind of some bald spots there. The soil wasn't as good, doesn't retain as much moisture. Again, the drought year, it's going to be harder for stuff to germinate. There's also more animal activity up there. It's closer for rodents, closer for birds, you know, closer to cover, so they're going to pop out, grab seeds, and pop back into the woods. So we've got plenty of bald spots. So our goal with the feed and weed technique is to fill in the bald spots, add another layer of palatable food throughout this fall season yet, and feed the soil as well as the existing plants. That's going to make for the best food plots you can possibly get. Again, maybe you haven't even thought about doing a food plot yet. I mean, we're getting towards the end of September now. You still got time. You could apply this stuff. Last year I planted my last food plot mid-October. So as long as there's moisture in the forecast, which is why I'm out here today, and which is why I was on a client property yesterday spreading my feed and weed combo, because there's rain in the forecast this upcoming weekend and next week. Once this warm front that's pushing through here breaks, it's looking like, fingers crossed, we're going to get a few days of cool, rainy weather. That's going to be just enough to get these nutrients into the soil, get the rye to germinate. Having rain in the close forecast is going to increase germination because there's going to be less seed predation. So that's critical. You don't want that seed to sit out there exposed too long. So rain's a must. But as long as there's rain in the forecast, you can spread this all the way down to 37 degrees Fahrenheit. At 37 degrees Fahrenheit, the cereal rye will still germinate and take hold. At 40 degrees Fahrenheit, it will grow and photosynthesize. So that's our goal, right? We want the best plots possible in the fall, obviously for hunting purposes. But if we're thinking about the soil health principles, we're going to cover all of our bases here. So I've already got the diversity aspect because I've got a multi-species blend in here. If you planted only brassicas, and I should clarify, if you planted a brassica blend, it's still just brassicas, okay? That's not diversity. 4 or 5 different types of brassicas are still just brassicas. They're taking the same stuff from the soil and they're not putting that much back. So think about that. So you want to always add diversity. We have diversity, but we're really trying to hammer down that constant living root in that food plot, especially over the winter. And rye is about as good as it gets when it comes to a plant that will winter over and green up first thing next spring. So what that's going to do, again, it's going to suppress weeds. Rye is allelopathic, so it's going to secrete a chemical that's going to reduce or hinder germination of other seeds. And when it grows very quickly. And so, you know, if you remove the sun aspect of those resources from weeds that start to grow next year, if you remove that from the equation, they're not going to grow real well, certainly going to be stunted and set them back. So that's our goal with that. So we've got the diversity aspect. We've got the living root that's going to winter over. Now, one of the things that most food plotters often overlook, and again, I'm saying this with the assumption that people watching this video understand or at least are aware of these 6 soil health principles. The last one, animal integration, okay? That's a hard one for a food plotter. You're a weekend guy, maybe you live across the country, across the state, across the county, doesn't matter. You're not on your property all the time. We see a lot more of that these days. It's not so much just the guy going out in his backyard and hunting. Animal integration is a hard thing. So I integrate animals on this food plot by pasture raising my chickens. They're not a ruminant animal. They're still beneficial, high nitrogen manure, but it still takes some time to break down. But the really, really beneficial microbes to put in your soil are going to come from a ruminant animal. And that's what we get with this manure-based fertilizer. Again, that added bonus is it has a cumulative effect. So whatever doesn't get used up this year by the plants is going to be in that soil. But as long as we have living roots in the soil, we keep that biology alive and we keep all those nutrients in that topsoil where we really want them. And that just gets better and better because we're building more topsoil over time. So fall, feed, and weed. Use this technique, save your plots, establish a new plot, whatever it might be. This is going to give you a huge jump start going into the fall season, give you a huge jump start going into the growing season next spring. That's going to provide your animals with a lot of nutrition early in the spring. This food plot here, the deer just demolished it this spring because it was the only green food source within miles of here. And they just hammered it until the native vegetation greened up, and then they slowly dispersed to that, and the rye was able to take off. So we're trying to provide our deer with as much food and palatability as possible, and we're trying to feed that soil, because the healthier the soil, the more nutritious the plants, and nutrition equals attraction. Fall, feed, and weed. Now, on the technical side of things, the application rate that I'm using is typically 100 pounds per acre of both the rye and the fertilizer. So I mix the two together in my fertilizer spreader so that I can do it all in one pass. If I'm just doing a small plot like this, I'm just going to broadcast it by hand, and I'm just going to chuck it. And I'm just going to do the rye and the fertilizer, or the fertilizer and the rye. Doesn't matter which order you go in, but 100 pounds per acre of the rye, 100 pounds per acre of the fertilizer. You can go heavier on both, you can go lighter on both. Again, you're not going to burn out your plants. This fertilizer is completely non-corrosive. There's no salt content to it. It's very low in acidity. It's not going to burn anything up. You can touch it with your hands, spread it around. Your hands will smell like manure, which, if you're trying to be a farmer, that smell smells like money, right? The real farmers understand the value of the nutrients in that, and that smell smells like value, or smells like money. So if you spread it by hand, which you can because it's non-toxic, no issues there, your hands are going to smell like manure. But you don't have to worry about having a hot spot here or there if you spill it on the ground. The other thing you don't have to worry about with this type of fertilizer is if the sun comes out and it doesn't rain for a week, it's not going to volatilize or oxidize and go up in the atmosphere like a lot of your synthetic fertilizers. Or if it rains a whole bunch, it's not going to leach into the ground or run off. It's going to break down quite quickly, very much like those worm castings. So it's all around about the best fertilizer you're going to get. I'm not going to go into too much detail on the exact nutrient makeup of this fertilizer because I'm still tweaking the blends just a little bit. And those blends are going to change based on your soil conditions or the area that you're in. So that's something you're interested in, you can always give me a call, shoot me an email, thomas@theuntamedambition.com, and we can look at your soil samples and put together a custom blend that works for you. You know, if it's not something you're thinking about doing this fall yet, we can certainly start thinking about next year. And if you haven't pulled soil samples, get it done right now. Let's start putting together a plan for next year, and we can break that whole thing down. One of the big things that I do is I break everything down on a timeline based on your goals and based on your budget. This stuff's not that expensive. You know, you're talking $20 to $25 a bag, sometimes $30 a bag, depending on where you're located. For the cereal rye, the fertilizer runs at about the same, a little bit higher. You're talking $30 to $40 a bag, depending on the blend. So it's really not that expensive, especially if you're only running a few small food plots. It's in your best interest to make those few food plots as good as they can possibly be, and this is how you get there. Now, in addition to this, as I mentioned, the chemical-free thing, if you want to get into a chemical-free food plot regimen, now is the time to think about that. Whatever you did this year, don't worry about it, don't overthink it. If you want to get into the chemical-free regimen, adding good nutrition to the soil and a good cover crop in the cool season is going to give you a huge head start next year during the warm season. There's far less weed competition this time of year, so it's a lot easier to get these cool season cover crops established, and it's a good head start going into next year. Why do we use chemicals? Weeds show up for a reason. They're there to fix something in the soil. It's either bare ground, they're there to protect that soil, that's nature's way of protecting the soil, or there's a nutrient deficiency in that soil, and that's what the weeds show up for. The combination of a balanced fertilizer that's organic, so it's not going to increase the acidity of the soil, and then our cool season cover crop, along with a diverse food plot planting, that's going to help balance things out and hold those nutrients and suppress the weeds. So the fall, feed and weed technique is just one of the many techniques that I employ in my chemical-free food plot regiment, and it's something I think you should try. Again, save your plots, make them better, always be thinking years down the road. Your plots might have failed this year because of dry weather or any specific reason, doesn't matter. Don't give up on them. You've got plenty of time. I mean, again, you've got close to a month. You can spread rye all the way through October. You can spread it in November. You can frost seed it next spring. But if you get it down now, and that's why I'm pushing this video out, is I'm hoping it's going to help someone this week yet, and they're going to look at the forecast and go, okay, I've got a few days, I can get out there and spread it. If you need the fertilizer, contact me. If you want to go pick something up locally, try to aim for an organic-based fertilizer. Get away from the synthetics. They're going to burn out your soil. They're going to increase the acidity of your soil, and that's just going to promote more weed growth next year. Organic, low corrosive or non-corrosive fertilizers, and cereal rye or winter rye, however you want to look at it. Again, my name's Thomas. This is the Untamed Ambition. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, drop a comment, shoot me an email. I'm here to help. This is what I do. So take care, and anyone getting out there to hunt this fall, best of luck.